We are so back, and today we are so back with our 5th episode of the Beaver Longface 300% Cuphead only using one weapon TM series. And with this being the 5th episode, we are now officially halfway through the series, which is very cool, but that's getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. There are still lots of terrible times to come in the future. But today is happily not one of those days. You see, whenever I do Cuphead speedruns, top 100 in the world by the way, we use two weapons, the spread shot and the lobber. Now we already did a spread video, and it was fun, but today we will be using the other weapon, the lobber. This thing is a melting machine. Not only is it just really nice and high damage dealing weapon, it's just insane in the base game. Not so much in the DLC, but in the base game, this thing's awesome. Also, for the base game portion of this run, I'm playing in version 1.1.5, but I'll explain why we're doing that later on. This intro is getting a little bit long, so I'll leave you with this. Remember, the whole run is done in expert mode, and yeah, let's just get started already. While I'm beating the first running gun passively, let me explain why I'm in version 1.1.5. To simply put it, it's because the lobber is the best in this specific version. While there's no buffs or nerfs given to the lobber in any other version, there is one thing that's different about it here, and that's a glitch called double damage lobbers, or sometimes triple damage lobbers. I'm not going to explain how it works too much. If you're interested, I go more in depth on the trick in how I became the best speedrunner video. So if you're really interested in how it works, go watch it there. But basically how it works is when you stand in a specific position, you can deal double damage and sometimes even triple damage, depending on if you're doing it right. With that briefly summarized, we can enter our first boss, the root pack. On the root pack, you can see our first instance of lobber traps and triple damage lobbers. First, we set up our lobber phase on the transition from the first to the second, where we basically just spam lobbers while facing up to nuke the boss as soon as it comes out. But then we line up in this specific spot with our straw right against the edge of the shovel and use a downright EX. This causes the lobber to hit 3 times and deal triple damage. And then we just melt the carrot. The strategy for Ribby and Croaks is to stay away from them like normal and spray, and the only real concern is when they do the fly attack, as it's kind of hard to hit the flies. It's not as hard as I thought it would be, but the lobber just has insane damage, so it's no big deal. The second phase goes by as normal, but in the third phase, we get a little fancy with it. Depending on which attack we get, we can do this crazy trick where we jump right close to the boss, use a downward EX over and over and over, and if you're in the right position, each one of these will deal double damage and destroy the boss's HP. Goopy Legrand has not a whole lot going on. Hey, that rhymed. You're going to notice that whenever I EX, I stay close to Goopy, and that's because I'm trying to get double damage lobbers every single time. And once I get to the final phase, there's nothing special about it. Sadly, it's just the same, and I guess you could say it's a little bit difficult having to chase the boss, but it's like that every time. Cagney Carnation is a interesting boss, because the lobber is very nice and its bullets are very easy to hit. The same can't really be said about the choppers. The way that they fly around is just so annoying how they're constantly homing onto you, and it can actually make it pretty rough to hit them sometimes. Cagney's final phase isn't terrible either, but you can only really hit her while you're standing on the first platform, so RNG can mess you up a little bit, but luckily it doesn't mess me up enough to lose. Baroness von Bonbon is actually surprisingly good for the lobber, as we can set up lots of mini lobber traps whenever it jumps. Sadly, the waffle forces us to deal pretty infrequent damage and drags on a little bit, but we do get lucky when we get the gobstopper to come out. On the final phase, we set up a tiny lobber trap at the start, and as soon as Baroness pops out, we just spam our EXs into her. This is super useful because it just nukes her HP right away, and if you've ever used the lobber on the final phase of Baroness, you know it's not that good, so this nuke at the start is almost essential. To everyone's joy, we now get to do all the plane fights for this challenge. Sadly, the lobber mostly sucks onto Jimmy. The first phase is pretty bad because we can't just stick to the top of the screen and spam, as all of his attacks have homing capabilities and will force us to move around a lot more. The second phase is nothing special, but on the third phase, we can do this cheese where we just sit at the top of the screen and rain down bombs on him. Another thing that's important to mention is that I wasn't allowed to use plain supers in this challenge, which means I was stuck with the terrible lobber EX. Final phase gets pretty scary at some points, but it isn't too difficult compared to when we can use the pea shooter as well. Beppy the Clown is a great example on how insane the lobber can be in the right situation. The first phase is normal, just great damage, real quick, real consistent. It's great. The second phase kind of sucks for the lobber, but if we can spam our EXs, we get through it really quick. We predict the side that Beppy's going to come down on and hit him with a little lobber trap, and then we just EX on him to get rid of him. In the final phase, we set up another lobber trap and just focus on EXing as much as we can here. I took out the baseball kids, but it definitely wasn't necessary. And then we finished the battle with a beautiful double damage lobber. Sadly, we are back on plane fights, facing Wally Warbles. Wally's first phase isn't too bad, as staying above him actually benefits us a little bit because his eggs miss us pretty often. The second phase really isn't that good to use lobbers on either. Being constantly above him just isn't useful at all. It's hard to line up the shots while dodging his feathers at the same time, so we end up staying on this phase for a while. Third phase isn't terrible, we just make sure that we don't hit his egg barriers with the lobber, as we'll be missing out on a lot of damage. The last phase is actually designed for the lobber, so all we have to do is just play it like normal and avoid the trash, and he's gone. You thought I was going to skip Hildeberg, didn't you? It's okay, you can admit it, but yes, today we are back on Hildeberg, with the lobber only. The first phase is really no challenge. Like most other plane bosses, as long as we are above Hildeberg, it's not bad to deal damage at all. It's actually no big deal until the final phase. And the final phase is rough. It's hard to stay on the top of the screen when the UFOs are constantly getting sent our way, and when she doesn't have her head sticked out, it's just impossible for us to deal damage unless we get real close, and I'm not taking that risk, but overall, the boss wasn't too bad. While we make the trek back over to Altitude, let me ask you guys something. Would you just make me the happiest person ever, and please, please, please like and subscribe? These videos take so long to make, it's absurd. And if you enjoy them, just let me know by going down there and hitting the like button. And while you're down there, may as well at least check if you're subscribed. I promise you won't regret it. Anyway, thank you. The lobber shot is simply the bread and butter of good matchstick. The trajectory is perfect, and it's never a challenge to hit the boss. It has stupid high damage, and the first phase is just nothing. Similar to every other time we do the second phase, as long as we listen to the sound effects, it just goes down so simply. The third phase also isn't too bad, as the trajectory is just real simple to aim on, and as long as we don't accidentally hit any of the fireballs that he shoots out, it's simple. Rumor Honeybottom's time. And it's very similar to Grim in the sense that the lobber kind of destroys here. You can see it best in the Officer B, but he's never in a position that we can't hit him in. On the second phase is when I would use all my EX in an attempt to over damage the boss, and on the transition we would again try and over damage to have a super short final phase. Dr. Call was so much harder than it needed to be. We have all had terrible experiences with Call on our first attempt, but for some reason, lobber only is just brutal here. You never realize it, but when you're not in a horizontal line away from your target in the first phase, it's really easy to just get hit by the other attacks. On the second phase, I can't use my super, which means I have to do it regularly, and avoiding these homing bombs was so much more annoying than I remembered it being. The last phase is also super rough, as it's extremely difficult to deal damage and avoid the gems. As well, just being above him does not work out. The only thing this weapon has going for it is that whenever the barriers would come and I would have to go over them, it could still hit the boss. Sally's stage play's turn, and the first couple phases honestly should be a cakewalk if I just didn't take so much stupid damage. Like, come on, what am I doing here? Mild mistakes aside, I was right. The first and the second and even third phase were super simple. The only slight difficulty will be on the last phase, and that's just because of how hard it is to hit the boss. Luckily, I planned for this, and we have all of our EXs to easily dominate Sally. Werner Werman is as basic as can be. Almost every weapon you use will be just as effective each time here, except for the lobber. In a good way though, because once again we are back using double damage lobbers. You'll see me line up my lobbers so they explode right next to Werner as many times as I can, and it just helps me get to the last phase so much quicker, where I use any of my leftover EXs to help me clean up. On to my favorite boss, Briny Beard. Briny Beard is a slight challenge with the lobber. Yes, I know. Briny Beard actually being difficult is insane. It's unheard of. But yes, the limited range of the lobber is actually pretty annoying here, as it's just hard to hit Briny Beard in the first phase. But once we get to the last phase, as long as we're constantly jumping, we can deal damage to Briny Beard just fine and send him sailing. Calamaria time, and let me be the first to say, I'm so glad to be back on this boss, if you know what I mean. It's slightly annoying that we have to always hit her head, which means that we have to be very close to her for our bombs to even hit, but nothing a little slow playing can't fix. On the second phase, sadly we can't use our super, but the splash damage from the bombs is a nice substitute. On the last phase, we take advantage of the trick where you stay right up close to the boss and not get frozen, and this allows us to just hit her with the lobbers over and over without being too much damage. Would you believe me if I told you that the Phantom Express was hard? Well, you should. At the start of the boss, we just farm parries and use a couple of EXs. The second phase, we try to set up lobber traps to predict where the skeleton head will be. We guess wrong pretty often. We focus one head in the third phase and then switch to the other side to get behind the lightning and EX whenever we can. We enter the final phase. And every time we parry the ball, we're going to try and use an EX just to maximize the amount of damage that we can deal. I actually tried to prioritize EXs over regular attacks because I do not like this phase. Dipsy Troop, Pip and Dot, Pirouetta. They all go down with ease. What do you want me to say? King Dice is easy. Onto a real boss now, the Devil. The Devil's first phase was way harder than I thought it would be. I put too much effort into trying to EX the Devil when I should have just been focusing on staying alive, so this tripped me up a couple of times. The second phase is very simple as long as we look out for the rising platforms, and on the third phase, as long as we can take care of those bats, I hate those bats, we can keep things normally under control and take out the henchmen whenever we deem fit. Sadly, we have to jump in order to hit the boss in the final phase, but with that knockout, it's officially DLC time. Glumstone Giant put me through every stage of grief. This guy was brutal. The short range of the lobber coupled with the constantly spawning gnomes that I have to take care of made it a terrible time. I also wanted to save EXs for a later phase, so it was hard to balance things sometimes. The second phase was terrible, is what I would say if I was bad at the game. But for some reason on this day, it just all clicked for me, and I got through it beautifully. The final phase was not nearly as fun as we had to constantly be jumping and moving around in order to even hit the boss, and whenever we do hit him, it's super minimal damage. I also tried to EX whenever I could here and going for parries, which didn't always work out for me. But with Glumstone defeated, it's time to move on. Mortimer Freeze is up next, and for once, the first phase is actually a slight challenge. Not so much of a challenge as it's more annoying, but hey, he'll take whatever points he can get. I ended up getting hit here a lot just by the minion attack because whenever I would be jumping up, it would just get in my way and trip me up. The second phase, similar to Glumstone, didn't pose as much of a challenge like it normally does, which was really nice. I expected it to be hard to hit the popsicles that he sent out, but it really just wasn't with the lobber. But the last phase, once you get the hang of it, really isn't that difficult, so for the first time ever, we seem to be making good progress on the DLC. Howling Aces has all the potential to be a bad boss. The fact that I either need to jump or move the plane in order to hit the boss really sucks, especially when the fire hydrant starts spawning, because it just adds a whole other layer of things I need to look out for, and I'm just not down for that. Second phase is annoying but not hard. Like every other weapon, we just want to face one direction and shoot the lobber till they eventually die. Final phase, I tried to damage the lasers whenever they came into position, but some of them were really hard to hit. But as long as we have a frontal cortex and the head tilt method, a few EXs is enough to take down the Howling Aces. Esther Winchester was not nearly as fun as I expected to be. I really don't like the first phase of this boss, and it doesn't help that in this challenge, the best way to hit the boss is only 50% of the time, when he's at the bottom of the screen. Patience was necessary for this phase, but once we get to the second phase, it gets a lot easier. Not stupid easy, but not too bad. The whole difficulty comes from the fact that we need to stay near the top in order to deal damage, which meant that we'll have less time to react to the falling safes. The third phase suffers from the same as the first, where it's really easy to damage the boss 50% of the time if he's at the bottom of the screen, but nothing some good RNG can't fix. For the final phase, the strat is to just dodge to the top every time and slowly but surely chip down the health. Dare I say it, I didn't feel like giving up as a Cuphead challenge runner while facing the Moonshine Mob. The lobber did an amazing job in the first phase. The combo of being able to set up lots of lobber traps and staying above the boss made the first phase a breeze. In the second phase, the strat was just the same as normal. Run in a circle, deal damage when you can. Third phase is also the same as normal, where we just stay on the side that he's attacking on and slowly deal damage. I thought that the last phase would be a challenge, especially at 1 HP, but I was so wrong. To the surprise of nobody, Chef Saltbaker is the hardest boss in this run. It is so infrequent for us to hit the boss in the first phase that we have to constantly be jumping all the time. I tried to hit as many parries as possible so I can use EXs to make it easier on myself, but didn't always happen. In the second phase, I ignored the two top screen pepper shakers and focused the bottom ones, using EXs whenever I seemed it fit. The third phase, again, is easy as long as you move left and right and don't get hit when it's falling down. But the final phase? This phase needs to be taken slow. Your sole focus on this phase should be keeping yourself alive. The only time you should hit the boss is going to be when you just happen to get lucky and it lines up in the right way. But with an insane amount of patience and a stupid good weapon, we have officially 300%ed Cuphead using only the lobber. Overall, the lobber is an amazing weapon. Solid 9.5 out of 10. This video was also very fun to record, and thank you guys so much for watching it. Please go down, like if you liked the video, and then subscribe. You know, it always helps. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.